Welcome to Meet, Act, and Part, a Masonic podcast hosted by Midnight Freemasons Greg Knott, Darren Lahners, Todd Creason, and Bill Hostler. The views, opinions and experiences that are expressed by the hosts or guests as individual Freemasons do not reflect the official position of any Grand Lodge, appendant body, or Masonic authority to which the hosts or guests belong. And now on with the show.
Everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Meet, Act, and Part. This is episode 61, and we're going to talk about social media and its impact on the craft and just some other general things tonight. But before we get going, as always, we'll introduce ourselves. I'm one of your co-hosts, Greg Knott.
And I'm Bill Hostler.
And I'm Darren Lahners.
Well, here we go. Happy New Year again, everybody. It's already February as we record this, so the year's bouncing right along. And speaking bouncing right along, social media keeps bouncing right along. It's always buzzing with all the latest Masonic news, and things. And what we thought we'd do this episode is just kind of explore its impact, intersperse that with some current events that have gone on in Freemasonry over the last, few weeks, months, and maybe really talk about how social media perhaps played a role in some of those things. And I think I'll just start off, Darren and Bill, and with one of the bigger topics was the Grand Lodge of Texas and all of its changes down there. And we're not going to really get too deep into all the dynamics of it, but from our topic tonight, there's probably no question that social media and Facebook, probably more likely in particular, played a huge influence on the decisions that the Grand Lodge of Texas members recently undertook with their communication. To compare and contrast that to even, maybe even 10 years ago, I think it's changed significantly. And so what's changed? Well, the speed of communication. I mean, the internet's been here for a long time. Facebook's been around 15 years, but I think what we've seen is this evolution of the amount of people that are, for the most part, that's where they're getting their information now is Facebook and other social media products, and the ability for people to influence others and inform them. And then when they come together, I think that some of those decisions are informed by the social media. So, Darren, what do you think? What are you seeing in regards to things like that?
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree. I mean, it wasn't quite social media, but I was privy to be put in a Facebook Messenger group that had some brothers are going to remain anonymous down there at the Grand Lodge and kind of giving play-by-play to a lot of other brothers who were, kind of interested in what was happening there. I think that, there was definitely a lot of use of social media and maybe alternate pages, i.e. not Grand Lodge sanctioned Facebook pages that allowed brethren to kind of communicate and express their opinions regarding changes that they wanted to see. Now, I guess, we can obviously I'm not a Texas Freemason. I'm not familiar with their Constitution bylaws, but we could, I guess, discuss and say, well, is this electioneering? Was this like a conspiracy to overturn the current Grand Lodge structure there? I think it was just brothers communicating and making their opinions known. And, every man votes for himself or votes for his lodge. And I know that they have different voting there. I believe past masters are allowed to vote as well as current members. So I believe that, they've got a different voting structure. Their constitution allowed flexibility for the brethren to, passed some pretty major legislation. Probably one of the biggest piece was that they were ultimately forced the Grand Lodge to have the trial of the past Grandmaster Brad Billings prior to their election. And that really kind of forced both sides, I think, to come to the negotiating table once that legislation passed. And next thing you know, next morning, they've dropped the trial and he's going to drop his lawsuit, and Harmony prevailed. So I'm sure that there was not probably the outcome of the election wasn't what the current office holders wanted, but again, not to get into the minutia of it, because I know basically very high level kind of what was going on, but I'm not going to say I'm an expert of what was happening there, but I think what did happen was that you saw use of social media and its impact on how it can impact, a Grand Lodge election.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Hey, Bill, let me ask you this. I was sitting here thinking about it, and, when you go back in history and look at old, Masonic writings from a variety of things, there was some pretty controversial topics at times. And so sometimes it makes me wonder if has Facebook really changed it, and social media, or simply the speed, and the frequency at which brothers can communicate with each other? Because, there's controversies have probably peppered Freemasonry since the beginning, and people don't like certain things in leadership. So, the membership says we're going to change it. And they probably in the earliest days writing letters to each other and later calling each other and whatever. But I mean, Bill, specifically, what do you think? I mean, you're down that way. You're familiar with Texas, but how do you think social media impacted it on Darren's points? Or do you think it's really that much different from 100 years ago, except for the speed at which we do things?
It's different, but it's not different, because 120, 150 years ago, the brethren would send each other circulars to each other's lodges. A lot of times they were anonymous, just trying to either, put something out there or even trying to put disinformation out there. But with Texas, I think the first thing is social media. They educated the brethren. I mean, over the years, as we know, since education and Freemasonry is verboten in a lot of places, a lot of this stuff kind of was not told anymore. As an example, when this Brouhaha first started out, the brethren did not, a good portion of them didn't know. They thought it was against Grand Lodge rules to nominate alternate candidates for election from the floor. They thought that whoever the Grand Lodge put up there as their thing, or the progressive line, that's what you had to go with. And many of us says, no, this is your Grand Lodge. You're the vote. You're the members. You have as much right to post and put someone up from the floor as the people in the Grand Line. You have the right. It's your Grand Lodge. Contrary to what some people think, is that you're just paying dues. I was going to say, and then the next thing is that it helped these guys get together. In a way, I'm a little disappointed they did it, because it was kind of the way I was going to end the 50-year member series, was just almost just like the way things rolled out in Texas. But about 10 years ago, I was belonging to a lodge, and the old guys and the young people just fought tooth and nail. They did not agree on anything. The lodge was going to die because these guys were going to walk. And then somebody had this brilliant idea. Why don't we, use our secret weapon, the internet, and to get ourselves together and organize ourselves like the current officer team had done in the open. So they started a private group, and they came up with their own list of officers, a whole slate. And then they got together, and then everybody voted in unison, and they actually got their vote in, just about what Texas did. And that's why I keep telling these brethren, don't quit. Your vote's needed. It's just because of things like this. And it gave the brethren of Texas, and they attempted it once before, but it didn't work. But it gave them the second chance to really get themselves together. And I think the situations that's been going on for the last year was their rallying cry, and it was the motivation for them to actually pull together and create change. But I really think that's, it wouldn't have happened without the internet or social media.
Hey, Darren, I mean, you see all the vitriol all over every platform of social media. And so 2 questions. One, again, do you think it's really different? And or if it is or isn't, do you think that the vitriol, and I count vitriol as just the negative comments, the drive-by comments, and everything, not just Freemasonry, but every kind of platform, and what impact do you think that might have had here, this most recent case? Good, bad. Do you think the truth is coming out in some of those discussions, or is it rumor mill? And again, is it really different than it was in any other communication platform?
I think to your point, and you alluded to this as well, is I think the difference is just the speed at which information can be disseminated. And I mean, look, I just recently, honestly, during their Grand Lodge, joined this Texas Freemasonry group where a lot of this was, I think, happening. I know it's not their Grand Lodge affiliated page. It's just a bunch of Texas Freemasons who have their own group. And I would say that it was probably more pro change than keep the same guys in place, just based upon what I saw scrolling back kind of in their history. And that, I think, social media, like anything, is a tool, and all tools can be used basically for good purposes or bad purposes. Not to get into philosophical debate here, but and that also means information or disinformation. And again, I'm not going to sit here and try to disseminate what information was true or false in Texas just because I'm so far away from that. But I mean, just on a broader point of view, how many times do you guys see a post and you just kind of are like, this is absolutely ludicrous? It's just, but it's freedom of speech. And I think the downside of the internet is, also why the downside of social media is also why social media was invented, is to, connect people kind of around, not only with friends or family, loved ones, etc., that maybe they're not able to see on an ongoing basis, but, they can kind of keep up with the Facebook posts and that. But I think also one of the problems with social media is that it has, I'll just say, I don't know, just to say social media or in general, just kind of media, and just leave it in more generic form. But what I really kind of fear with social media, and I've had this fear for a while, and as it becomes more advanced and more rapid, I guess, is that I fear that, to allude to your point, where people are using social media for their primary source of news, and they're not sourcing what they're seeing, or they're not, researching what they're seeing, and they're taking it as, God honest truth. I think that it's led almost to a dumbing down of our society in general. And that not only has it led to a dumbing down of society, that it also, I feel, has led to a issue with, our attention spans. I mean, I'll be honest, I was just recently diagnosed with adult ADHD. And, my wife would have said, oh, I knew when I met you had ADHD, but
yeah, it's no surprise to either of us either. I mean,
but, I mean, yeah, I guess when you're closest to it, you don't see it. But, I have to wonder myself, was this because I've grown up, and even, I'm Gen X, I just turned 50. So I've not been in front of a screen for my entire life, like a lot of these kids are going to be for, their lives. But I've been either with television or personal computer back in the day at a Commodore 64. I've been kind of hooked in with tech and in front of a screen, and that's what I do for a job. So I can't but wonder, has this had an effect on why my attention span is the way it is? And then, we factor in something like TikTok, where it's just basically you're scrolling mindlessly, and there's these little vignettes, I guess, for lack of a better term. What's that doing to people in general? So I guess, I don't want to sound like a Luddite, even though tech is my job, but, I think that there are potential dangers to social media, and like any other media. And I think that social media and, has also allowed the spread of conspiracy. And, this is coming from a guy who does a YouTube video with another friend of ours where we talk about, UFOs, aliens, Bigfoot, all these conspiratorial things, or these cryptids and that. But I'm talking more, I guess, about the nonsensical, the QAnon stuff and all the nonsensical stuff that you see. I mean, look, we're at a point where a guy just recently, I think it was in Pennsylvania or Ohio, beheaded his dad and was live on camera on social media and showed his dad's head off because he was convinced his dad was working for the deep state, and that he had to be killed. So, I mean, I'm just saying, back in my day when I had to ride my BMX bike up to the library, I don't think I was enforced to research things, and God bless the internet for having information at the tip of our fingertips. But I think there's something to be said, and I think you better retain information when you have to work at it. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Well, but then again, you could have come to that same library and picked up books on, the Illuminati or anything like that. It's just, and if you didn't read anything else other than that, that could have tainted your bias just as much as anything else. I don't blame the source as much as I do the content and the people that are too lazy to actually get out and look at anything other than what they want to believe.
Of course, I've spent a lot of my life in libraries. My mom worked in one growing up. When I was growing up, so I was there all the time. I worked in a library, got a library degree, etc. And it's one of the things they take you in basic training in one of my earliest classes in library science was just to learn how to disseminate facts. And it's not rocket science what we were doing, looking at original sources and this, that, and the other. But I think, Darren, you're pretty much spot on. That kind of thing's almost a lost art. And, sitting in front of these screens all the time, which I'm just as guilty in, doing it too, your attention, I've noticed my attention span is much shorter than it was, years ago. But yet yesterday, it's funny, I was out taking pictures. So I was in this along Lake Barkley, which is in Kentucky, and I literally was in this place by myself. I'd walked through this bog in low water and was out there just at the lake, and there was geese flying in, there were ducks flying in, and cranes and other things. And like literally, I was just sat there for a while, just listening to the silence, so to speak. And it was amazing how quickly my mind cleared up, when I was not sitting there distracted by all of these other things. And, I think we've touched on this in other episodes over the last 3 years and some of these topics, but I really think there's something that we need, to separate ourselves from these devices. After I retired, I've been subbing at our local schools, and you go in and, the kids want to be on their phones. So you're trying to keep them off their phones just so they can sit there on their Chromebooks, doing, their classes and whatever. And, I've asked some of the teachers, and they're all younger than me now. I go, is this effective learning? And it is, but it's so different. Of course, here we go again, sound like one of the old guys. It's so different than, 1984 when I left. Sometimes I worry about the depth of instruction. When you're just saying, hey, it's out in your Google Classroom, there's an assignment out there, go do it, versus, challenging them to think. And I know the teachers, they do challenge them to think. My glimpse of that world is very limited on being a sub. However, I still worry about the depth of knowledge that people are learning. One more story. When I was coming through a town in deep southern Illinois, Cairo, Illinois, and I stopped at their library a few days ago. Beautiful library. Cairo has this really long historic history of being on the waterfront, and it's went through a lot of troubled economic times over the last, 50 to 75 years or more. Anyway, stopped in this library, and I met this gentleman, an African-American gentleman, and we ended up talking for almost an hour. And just a fascinating individual. He'd been a civil rights leader. He actually knew Martin Luther King and a bunch of other stuff. But we actually got on the very topic that we're talking right here tonight. And that was the attention span of young people. And he and I's concern about, if they can't go out and find it in 30 seconds or less, will it even matter? And in that context, we were talking about history. And, history is facts, and facts can vary, I understand, but it's just, we sat there and talked for a long time about where are we going with all this and what's it going to look like down the road. And we were talking about civil rights as a topic, and how the further you get away from the 1960s, and this would be true of any topic, but you just quickly forget. And the ability to just scroll past it on these screens is just, it's going to intensify, as unfortunately social media I don't think is going to go away. So to bring it back to Freemasonry, and we've been, as a group, probably the longest targets of misinformation campaigns in the country's history, probably. And whether it was in written form or, groups of men talking or whoever with each other, we've long faced this. But, part of and we've talked about this in other episodes too, we never responded to it. And so did we ever do ourselves any favor? And so now here we are in 2024, and the speed of which it's infiltrated everything, and how will society adapt going forward? Okay, so that's a lot of rambling, I realize, for people that are listening to us, but it just makes you wonder going forward. I worry about dissemination of facts, dissemination of good information, ability for people to read it, study it, hear it, understand it, more importantly, and not just be able to go out and pick their own facts. I think that's, to me, the most dangerous thing of social media is the speed, the algorithms, which basically feed you what you want to hear. And so you're reinforced all day long on what you think. Well, unless you're a free thinker, I think like the three of us, I can question things. And, that's why I read a wide variety of things. But bringing it back to a Masonic example, you could go on either an information or a misinformation campaign and try to influence a Grand Lodge vote. So I guess, bringing it back to our topic of social media, it's very real on what it could do in terms of decision-making within lodges and Grand Lodges. Bill, what do you think?
No, I think you've got a real point. I mean, it's kind of like whoever has the loudest voice and the most persuasive voice is going to be the one that people follow. And I think you're absolutely right in a lot of things, like the attention span. I've told people this for a lot of years. I says, go back and look for a newspaper ad for cereal from the 1920s, 100 years ago. If you look at that, there'll be 6 paragraphs explaining what this cereal's like. Then you go to like the 1950s and you'll see it's like a 30-second television commercial. They'll still explain to you what's all in them and how good it is for you. But it's definitely a lot less information. Till you get to like our guys, Gen X, we remember like Kellogg's is good, us like a nice little jingle will make us buy it. But now, you go to and you watch TV and there's like the ad is a 30-second cartoon of a dancing Cheerios bee. And that's pretty much all you get out of it. There's zero information other than this bee dancing. So it just keeps getting shorter and shorter to the point where I'm thinking it's almost going to be like a subliminal thing pretty soon. But yeah, I think it's just, you pointed out something that I had never thought about the possibility of, instead of something being good for the Grand Lodge, we could put up something that's bad for the Grand Lodge. But all I know is that we're using it as a tool, and it's something that we needed to have to help us change, at least because whatever we've been doing for like the last 50 years hasn't been working. And at least we're starting to see some fruit, and I don't know how else to do it other than like that.
Hey, Darren, I'm wondering, again, I know we've probably touched on this too in previous episodes, but at which point do we just all get so tired of social media and everything sort of wrapped around it? Does it get abandoned? It's funny being around the kids that I've been in school with, again, that's all they've known. They were born, late 2000s, and this literally is all they've known. And it's almost, I can sense a curiosity in them of a world without some of this stuff. They, what their parents, or, I'm even older than some of their parents at this point, but, do you think it's not going to go away, but do you think it'll ever get turned on its head and people just say enough is enough?
That's a great question. So I think like the platforms like Facebook, I think will at some point die out or evolve to be more like TikTok or Instagram or some of those where it's just more kind of picture based. So, I mean, to my knowledge, a lot of, I would say that, I think the current, generation, my kids' generation and younger aren't really using Facebook. It's us old farts that still use Facebook. They're using Snapchat and they're using, other platforms to communicate and share memes and ideas. It's, just probably some of, I would say, probably millennial upward that are, beholden to Facebook. I guess let me ask you both this question, because I'll share with Bill this interaction I had with his buddy Brother Fluff. Brother Fluff is a Masonic TikToker who's gathered a following of 30-some thousand people, which is pretty impressive. Maybe it's more than that. It probably is more than that. But and he will go on and do these things which are lives, where basically he's just live and answering people's questions. The God bless, the idea, but what bothers me is that I don't know that Brother Fluff is very well versed in Masonic history or those sorts of topics. So when you have somebody who is out there and not giving correct information to people that are seeking it, I guess, is that doing more harm than good, to our fraternity? And I'm all about, we have to guard the West Gate, and we have to guard the West Gate. But my fear is that, and, if you've read my material, I've said this before, but the issue is that we get this mixed message from, and at least in my jurisdiction, I feel like we get a mixed message from Grand Lodge, where Grand Lodge is always preaching they want more membership, because we're chasing some imaginary number that was an aberration that happened after World War II, where we had millions of men join our fraternity because of the camaraderie, missing the camaraderie that they felt in combat and sort of that esprit de corps. And Freemasonry provided that for them at that time. There wasn't really a lot of other outlets. I mean, there were probably other fraternal groups that some of them joined, or the Elks, or, Rotary, what have you. But I almost want to say that a lot of the downsizing of Freemasonry, and I don't think that's necessarily a terrible thing, but I believe that it's occurred also kind of parallel with this, these increases in technology to the point where you have, if you were agoraphobic and you right now in this day and age, if you're agoraphobic and you never wanted to leave the house, you could still survive. You have groceries, food delivered. You can basically have endless entertainment possibilities with all the streaming packages, et cetera, that are out there. And so I think what, technology does, up until, I guess, social media, is that, technology was very kind of isolating, especially, back in the day before there were devices to record television shows. Why do you think the finale of MASH had such a high viewer count? One of the highest in history. Well, MASH was at that time a very popular show, a cultural phenomenon probably in our country, and a very popular program. And also, nobody had devices to record that finale. So that was probably going to be the topic that was going to happen. Everybody's going to be talking about the next day around the water cooler. So you're damn right that everybody tuned in to watch the finale of that show. I guess to my broader point is that as we've seen kind of the increase in technology, and we've seen technology's isolation of people, I will say that it's almost to the point now where, at least with technology, you aren't you're not isolated in that way, but you're isolated in other ways. I don't know if that makes sense, but my point being that, taking the MASH example, everybody had to be home for MASH at that time. Now you can watch whatever on the go. You don't have to be in one particular place, but you're still attuned to, that device. Essentially, we've picked up the television and we've made it small enough for people just to transmit it around. Now, again, a lot of communication in one's communities and decision making in communities were usually done at local restaurants, coffee shops, what have you. And I'm sure both of you can give me examples of, remembrances of your seeing grandparents or your parents, aunts, uncles, that would hang out at a certain spot. And that was kind of where they held court and their friends would be there. And that's how they shared kind of the town gossip. Well, you don't need that anymore. You don't need that interaction because of, social media. You've got a social media group where you can complain about everything going wrong with your community and why you should have a community pool, fire department, or what have you. And Greg will chuckle because he knows what I'm talking about. But so, yeah, I think, to Bill's point, yeah, we can use Freemasonry to advertise Freemasonry, but are we getting the type of guys we want? And that's where I'm like, yeah, if they're joining because of some guy on TikTok, and no offense, Brother Fluff, if you ever hear this, but I just don't know that that's the right type of person we want in the fraternity.
Well, right on all of that, except, it's fine to bring people out there, and bless him. I know Fluff, he's only been a Mason for only a couple of years now, so he's still got a lot to learn. So I think he probably should, pay a little more attention and instead of being online. But I guess, and I'm sorry if you hear that, Fluff. I don't mean it that way. I'll explain if I ever talk to you. But what we need to do is it's fine to have all these people knowing about who we are, because let's face it, all through time immemorial, they knew who we were. It's just that we didn't just open the gates and say, come on in, boys. We had people actually paying attention, investigating, and doing due diligence. And they didn't just let every clown come in. So it's fine that they know. It's just we have to do our part too. None of this, he might be a better man if we let him in. Or, we need numbers. Or, we're going to be closing the lodge if we don't have anybody. Well, that's bunk. But, and you're right in a lot of that stuff. It can be isolating, but I also know it can also be a tool. Everything that God's given us can be a tool if we use it in the right way. Just like you can use a hammer to hammer and nail, or you can use it to, beat someone over the head. There's a right and wrong way to use it. And I think that a couple of years ago, we proved that with the epidemic. I mean, you look at how, we started using social media to check on each other, to make sure we're all right, to get help for each other. We held Masonic education classes over Zoom. We did all the things. I mean, even you guys in Illinois can even hold some kind of limited lodge meetings on Zoom. It's just we're not using our stuff to the great potential. And sadly, if somebody isn't using it to the right potential, we don't do nothing about it. I don't know what there could be do, but I mean, there's got to be, if there's a tool.
One thing about social media, I was thinking about the Midnight Freemasons. Todd Creason really started that blog, really before the heavy influence of Facebook. And, he was getting lots of numbers, and the three of us all joined at various stages later on it. The thing I always still like about the Midnight Freemason website is the articles can go more in depth and tell you more than, the drive-by comments that are so prevalent in Facebook. And I still like blogs. I know their popularity is way down because of other platforms. But I just, I've always thought our Midnight Freemason blog and all of our contributors over the years, they bring a viewpoint that you just don't really get on Facebook. You do occasionally, but, or Chris Hodap's blog, Chris, he'll put a little snippet on Facebook, but it's redirecting you to the blog where he's given a more thorough and in-depth story or analysis or whatever the topic is. I guess that's, and it still kind of goes back to those points we were talking about earlier about misinformation and, verifying your own biases because the algorithm will show it to you. But, social media has been valuable. It's not driven our numbers up. So I guess in that aspect, it hasn't worked. I do feel more connected with Freemasons across the country and probably the world because I've met so many of them, or, I met them at Masonic Week and, ended up being a Facebook friend. So we've been able to keep up with one another. So I think it's extremely valuable for that. But, by and large, it hasn't driven the vast numbers back to, the lodges. And here's something I was thinking about today. I was in a I took some stuff to Goodwill, so I went in there and I always like to look at their books. And I was just noticing how many Dan Brown books were, in the Goodwills now. Time you end up at Goodwill, it's probably 8 to 10 years after or more after the publication date, and you're pretty much history. And I just remember Chris Hodep either writing or talking about this or both one time about when the Lost Symbol came out. He's like, boy, we better be prepared because there's going to be so many men beating at our doors waiting to get in. And well, it didn't really pan out that way. And so
technically it did, but the problem was it's like pouring water down the sink. We didn't put a stopper in there to keep them.
It would have been a very short period of time. I know they didn't pound on our lodge doors.
They wanted the Lost Symbol, and we gave them grumpy old men.
Yeah,
it's true.
Yeah,
that's a great analogy, Bill.
But I guess if a book even that vastly publicized, and it ended up at a TV series of limited success, I think, on it. But, that didn't turn anything around either. And, so here's this. Darren, you talk about the West Gate. Really, we don't have that many people knocking at the West Gate in our, we get a fairly okay stream of members. And I think it's okay. I don't care if we don't have tons of people knocking at the door. I think we need a steady stream of interested, good, well-qualified men that we can come in and, they learn from us and we from them. Mm-hmm. But some of them, I think, may have saw it on social media, but I'm not sure that was really still their primary influence for coming. Do you or not?
I think people join for various reasons. In particular, you roped me into this mess. So if I ever blame anybody, why'd I become a Freemason? I've got a person to point to. But all kidding aside, yes, everybody I think has a different motivation for joining. What attracted me was honestly when I knew very little until Greg started talking to me about it, and I did my research, and the history and the philosophy really kind of aligned with a lot of other kind of my own personal philosophy and the idea of self-improvement and growth and the study of the classical liberal arts and sciences and all these things really, really piqued my interest. And so here I am. But, you have guys who are joining because their dads were Freemasons. You have guys who are joining because their grandfathers were Freemasons. You have guys who are joining just because they read the Dan Brown book and said, hey, what a neat idea. I think back to Bill's point, the membership issue that we have, and Bill has alluded to this as well, is that I don't think we necessarily, if lodges were better able to retain members or empower members and get them on the same page and fired up about what they were doing, your lodge is going to have a better recipe or have a recipe for success. But everybody has to be on the same page and everybody has to want to put in the work to make that happen. So, case in point, we've got a local lodge here in Mahomet, which now that I live in Champaign is not that far from me. And I've quite frankly thought to myself many a time, as much as I want to continue helping Homer and St. Joe, I almost feel like, man, that's a lodge on the up and coming. They're doing a lot of stuff. It might be a nice place to plural up with, see what I can do to help. But of course, once again, I'm also deeply invested in these two, I'll say rural lodges because they are. St. Joe, even though it's a suburb of Champaign-Urbana, is still a very small rural town. Honestly, Mahomet and St. Joe kind of were the twin cities, if you were, of, where people who were commuting into St. Joe were moving in the mid to late, or to Champaign, were moving kind of mid to late 90s. There was a lot of development that kind of started in both towns. And I'll say, Mahomet did a better job of improving their community and growing their community. I think they probably have tripled or quadrupled their population from what it once was. Whereas St. Joe, there's been growth, but it's been stagnant because basically the infrastructure isn't allowing any more development there. What essentially happens where you have a thriving kind of town like Mahomet, and you finally got some brethren who have energy and passion and again are all on the same page and making things happen there. And their lodge is growing because of it. And I mean, I don't know, I know people in Urbana, but I was told the other night that Urbana's got like entered apprentices coming in left and right. So these lodges are doing something right. Or they're just not guarding the West Gate. I don't know which, but maybe a combination of both. But I'm not a member, so that's not for me to say. I have no insight into any of that. But my point being that what you have is you have membership that is dedicated, and they're all on the same page, and they're excited to be with each other. And I honestly have believed, unfortunately, that especially in our lodge's case, Greg, that we have membership that we like to meet, but we don't like to do a lot other than that for whatever reason. And Lord knows, when I was master, I tried everything I thought I could try to get brother engaged and together, and it just didn't pan out. And I finally just realized, well, unfortunately, this is how the culture of the lodge is at this moment, and we either have to wait it out, or we're going to end up closing the doors. And we've made a little bit of a turn, and I'm hoping we'll continue that. We got a new member at St. Joe finally after many years, which he's just seems to be so far dedicated to Freemasonry. He did our last meeting, Bill, he did the EA catechism. He did the what we call that we got short form and long form. He did the long form, which was super impressive because I had never seen it. And quite frankly, I don't know that I could, knowing the ritual I know, I don't know that I could even do it, as well as he did. So, I was just so impressed by this. He's not that younger than I am, but I'll still call him a young man, that he, was this dedicated and chose that path. And it really inspired me. It was inspirational. So, if we get more membership like that, we have to retain them. And that means you have to make lodge worth coming to, either dinner beforehand, education, both, in my opinion, and then doing things in the community and trying to, be visible in the community. And then hopefully at some point you have the right bait, you catch the right fish, and that fish will bring in other fish, and you can get things rolling again. But it really kind of boils down to, you have to put the effort into it. And I think a lot of times we get to a point where you have membership and, Freemasons do not like change. And a new member is change, or has potential for change. And a lot of guys, in my experience, will basically sabotage new membership just because they don't want things to change as it is. And
I was going to say, that's, you have positive energy at those other lodges, where a lot of the times the Thai ones had the negative.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a reason for that, but we didn't do it that way. There's absolutely a reason for that.
I think that's when, Darren, when you talk about Muhammad, and you had Vance Martin on, 4 or 5 episodes ago, he was a key catalyst. And I think, others that maybe were reluctant to the change, either, changed their mind or, just faded out. And that, he kind of brought a charisma to the group. Then he brought some others that joined in that, and then, it's been infectious. We've seen that, in our St. Joe Lodge years ago. We got it all going again, and things were on fire, in our other lodge at Homer. I think the thing I like about Homer is it's good and steady. We're doing some education. We're actually still bringing in some guys. It's not this fast growth. It's not dying. It's, may not be something where we're meeting, weekly to go do something, but I feel we're on the upward swing on those. Urbana, which is another local lodge Darren mentioned, they've got 5 entered apprentices coming, and I don't know if they're friends or what they're doing, but I think it's a great thing. But, tying it back to our social media topic, have any of those people came in because of social media? I know in St. Joe and Homer that wasn't the case. Urbana, I don't know. But yet then again, at least maybe knew about us because we did have a social media presence. So it's like a hot and cold, good and bad. You got to be there. You don't exist, but yet you get all the garbage that sometimes goes with it. When you are.
I wouldn't be here if it wasn't.
So I'll just say in Homer's
social media.
So there we go. Another reason why the internet's bad.
I knew about Freemasonry since I was a child. Because my parents were older, but I knew of one fella after I got older who was a member, and I don't know, he just didn't seem to be that interested in, well, he was interested in me becoming one, but he never really told me where to go. And so one day I said, well, I'm going to look it up. So I got on Yahoo, it shows you how long ago that was. I put in like Indiana and Freemasonry, and the Grand Lodge of Indiana's lodge come up, or the page came up. And so I look for lodges in your area. And I said, look for Fort Wayne. And I clicked on it. And there was one lodge in Fort Wayne that had a website. And I clicked on it, and I just got, I don't know if it was like meant to be or what, but there were several guys I used to work with who were members of that lodge, and their pictures were on there. And it's like, whoa. And so about 2 weeks later, I was walking into a truck stop, and one of these guys come walking out of the restaurant as I was walking in. And I grabbed him, and I told him, I said, the one thing I do know is I have to ask to be a Mason. And he said, well, yeah. And he said, he come walking in with me, and we sat and talked, and that's how I got the ball rolling. So if it wouldn't been for the interwebs and the lodge having a website, I probably would have just said, well, it's been this long, I'll wait a little longer.
Yeah, I think I knew of it. It was because of a Masonic funeral I joined, but that spurred me to go, at least, keep in mind this was 2006 or 7. I was looking at a web page, which was very generic, got some information, and it's what kind of intrigued me too. So it's like, it's, I suppose maybe the moral of all this, everything has a place, but sometimes, there can just be too much of a place or too much of a thing and on the same token of things. So I don't know. I suppose we haven't come to any great resolution in all of our discussion here tonight.
Let me ask you one more question.
But we do bring it up. They're good topics, I think, to continue to talk about.
I got one more question about social media and Freemasonry. It's not been such a big deal lately, but it was a couple of years ago. It was fairly common. How do you feel about Grand Lodges putting up code of conduct for what you do on your social media posts on the internet?
Well, I'll just go ahead and answer that, Bill. Until they start enforcing it, it's just a piece of paper. So in this jurisdiction, it's been a piece of paper. And to be quite honest, there was a situation, I think it's been a few years ago now, where, there was and he's still a Grand Line officer, made some disparaging comments on somebody's page and got basically called out on it, and then was really kind of not very brotherly to the brothers calling him and trying to whisper good counsel, to the point where he got escalated to the Grandmaster, and the Grandmaster apparently had to take the guy aside and say, look, this isn't, you're a Grand Line officer. We expect a certain decorum and, basically clean your act up. But, the beauty, I guess, and the bane of social media is that it allows everybody a voice, and you're not always going to agree with that person's point of view. A recent case in point, because I decided to use some AI generated image for the last article on Midnight Freemasons, and it went on Facebook and other Bill's social media, because he does a great job of, making sure this stuff's seen. And you could see why he's laughing, because quite frankly, it was that ridiculous, where I had people, basically saying that I was portraying Freemasonry in a sinister fashion. Yes, I was basically perpetuating this Illuminati myth by having this picture of basically men in suits of different nationality, and then there was the all-seeing eye and the pyramid, which I think led to the Illuminati thing. But it's almost to the point, quite frankly, Bill, that I was at the point where I was seriously debating just saying, Bill, we're gonna just get rid of social media for the Midnight Freemasons blog, and that's going to be that. And if they want to sign the article, they can come and find us, but I don't need this headache.
That's the thing that really grinds my gears. There's all this talk about a picture on the cover, which is basically we use that to get people's attention.
It's clickbait. I'm not going to lie, it's clickbait.
Yeah,
the title and the picture are usually clickbait. Sorry, sorry, but that's.
But very rarely do they ever say anything about the article that. That's why a couple of years ago, you guys have wrote a couple of things lately about it. And a couple of years ago, I wrote that one, Brother George Costanza and Breakfast at Tiffany's Freemasonry. Just for that simple thing, people will sit there and comment on the title and the picture, but they won't even go and bother to read it. They might throw the
So-
SMIB on there, but that's about all they get. And I just wanted to see how many people actually read that article.
Mm. You know, we since we don't monetize that blog, we make no money off the Midnight Freemasons
It costs
blog.
us money. If they would have probably just put a square and compass where the Illuminati logo was, nobody. Well, they would probably, because there's different races in it, they would probably get upset about that. But for all practical purposes, nobody even said boo about it.
Well, I'm just
And
going
that's
to
sad.
go from now on. I'm just going to go with either one of the two memes I used for my leadership article, where it was the old Microsoft paperclip, or it was Willy Wonka basically saying, "Oh, you know, you want to comment? You're going to have to read the article." Was basically the meme. So that may just be the picture going forward to every article, and so be it.
That might not be a
I
bad
mean,
idea. I mean,
just-
if they don't read it, it's not like we're out any money.
Yeah.
Right.
So I guess just a couple things. Bill, you're back to your question on this thread of it. You know, there's times I cringe what I see out there, what some people post, and I've probably been guilty at times. I've pretty much disciplined myself. It's hard. I've deleted stuff after I
use that as catharsis, where I'll write something out and then I'll be like, I have to delete it. I can't hit send, but I feel better for at least responding without responding.
And
I can't even throw stones about putting stuff up there that I shouldn't. So
yeah, I mean, the social media policy from Grand Lodge, if you think about it, there's a line in the 14th degree of Scottish Rite, which I won't get into, but basically it says we've got all these ideals that we stand for, and yet we can't enforce them. Only you can enforce them yourself on yourself.
exactly.
And I think that's one of the most powerful lines of ritual in all of the various degrees that I've been through. It basically just says, this is up to you. We can show you the way. We can teach you and help you learn and all of these things. But it's in the end, it is up to you, because what comes out either through the keyboard or through the verbal or otherwise, and God knows I've been guilty of it, because it's human nature. It's, govern yourself accordingly, I get, really is sort of the thing. And I think I'm better. Not, I think I'm better because of friends like you and others that I have in the fraternity that, frankly, help me think about these things and say, well, he probably wouldn't put it out there, so I'm not going to either. Or that wouldn't reflect very well, or it could get misinterpreted. And so it does make me think. And so I think if anything in this fraternity, it's opened my eyes to so many different viewpoints, so many different people from different walks of life. And that impacts daily how you interact either on social media or in groups or with your family or whatever. So I guess, talk about social media. I guess it has impacted me because I've got friends all over the country that I trust and interact with, that also, even though a lot of times you don't really talk to them every day, they still help shape me.
I think you
to
just
hopefully
said
be a
right
better
there in
person.
that few words what this whole hour of episode has been. Is what you just said pretty much sums up the entire hour of what we've been trying to say in those few short words.
Yeah, and that's it. So, I mean, guess maybe that's a good place to transition it out here. But, just to kind of sum up everything, social media has a place. It's not going to go away. It's a fast, viral communication method that I don't think as individual humans we can fully grasp the reach and the speed of it. And so sometimes when we do put something out there and it goes viral, because, we've all seen that with things that people have put out there, to govern ourselves accordingly, that I was just talking about a little bit ago, we should keep that right there in our mind, or tie a string to your finger or whatever it is to remind us, because all these short attention spans that the three of us probably have as well now, it's like, oh, wait, put the brake on, do it for a minute. Wise counsel. There's a couple, Darren, there's a couple of faces that come to my mind of some of our brothers that aren't on the internet at all. They're older. And, I think, one from Ogden in particular, I always just think he's giving me wise counsel at times. This guy is not on social media, zero. And, I think about him a lot. That causes me to slow down and think before I hopefully speak or think about how I interact with others. And his influence on me is probably more than he knows, but it is, that's just something, again, as a benefit from this. But so for me, tying it up, it is, I'll say, govern yourself accordingly, slow down, make sure what we put out there, and not just social media, either in the verbal form or when you interact with others, is, not just because of how you should be viewed as a Mason, but really more importantly, how a good human being. Darren,
and
closing words?
I was just going to say, just remember, everything on social media is probably going to stay there for eternity. So if, we're leaving basically our children and grandchildren and their children, et cetera, a digital legacy, if you will. So I would just say, try to be a person that you're going to make, your children, your grandchildren, and their children proud of, and not a man that seems ignorant towards various things. So that's almost sometimes lost on brethren, that, we're quick, and trust me, I've done my fair share. I've PO'd people. I'm sure there's somebody who has a people I hate list, and I'm at the top of that list. And, you can't please people all the time. You're going to probably rub some people the wrong way, but I just try to be me and be authentic and genuine. And I think that's all you can be as a person, and try to be that way on social media.
Bill, what do you think? Any final comments?
Well, I never thought about this as pertaining to anything in the digital age, but long time ago, I used to have this practice. So I thought to myself, I thought it was pretty smart. I don't know if it was original or not, but I thought it was, because I never heard anybody say it at the time. But I always thought to myself, I'm never going to write anything down that I wouldn't want my mother to see. And that pretty much, for the most part, has carried me well over the years. And I never really thought about it till just this evening, but that's probably a good way just to do what you would do on social media. Granted, a lot of that stuff, my mother would probably look at me like, what are you thinking? But I don't really put anything that she would probably not laugh at or disagree with either. But I think that's, if all else fails, use your common sense. Try to remember who you are and what you want to be and who you represent, and just try to be a good person.
Yeah. We appreciate everybody joining us here on Meet, Act, and Part. Take a moment and govern yourself accordingly if you're on social media. And if you have thoughts on this, well, guess what? You can come to our social media page on Facebook and leave us a comment. So until next time, it's another exciting episode of Meet, Act, and Part.
Thank you for listening to Meet, Act, and Part. For more information about our show, visit our website at www.meetactandpart.com. While there, please consider supporting the show by sponsoring us on Patreon. Until we meet again, may we meet, act, and part.